Topsy here from OhSewGeeky. Today I'm going to show you how to use my new pattern to make your very own Pony Plush. There are two patterns, one for a stallion, one for a mare. This tutorial will work for either one. Both versions of the pattern have an optional Clydesdale style leg, so either one could have a Clydesdale or a regular style leg. So let's get started. Here's what you'll need.
Some sort of fabric. You'll need about a half a yard of whatever non-stretchy fabric you want to use. I'm using a low pile fleece. If you're making Clydesdale style hooves, you'll also need whatever color you want the hooves to be. Felt for the eyes and cutie mark. You'll need white, black, and whatever other colors your design requires. Stuffing. Thread to match all of the fabric you're using. Yarn in the color of your pony's mane and tail, and body color if you're making a Clydesdale. Tacky glue, scissors, pins and needles, a sewing machine, a pen or marker, and a printed copy of the pattern available for free at OhSewGeeky.com. There's a full link in the description below. You'll notice that most of the pieces each has two outlines. The inner dotted line is the sew line, which we'll be using later. For now, we need the outer solid line. This is the cut line. Start by cutting out each of the body pieces along their cut lines. Hold off on cutting out the eyes. We'll get to those later on, and we don't want to lose any pieces. Fold your fabric over on itself with the right side on the inside. Start laying out the pieces labeled one right side, one wrong side, and tracing them. These are the parts that you want mirror images of. When you get to the body and legs, you'll notice some gray sew lines. This is to give you the option of making Clydesdale style legs and hooves. If you don't want Clydesdale style legs, just ignore that gray sew line and trace these like all of the other pieces. But if you do want the Clydesdale style legs, cut along those lines right now. Put the smaller pieces aside, we'll need them in a little while. Trace the larger piece onto your fabric, but be sure to add a little extra at the bottom of each leg for a seam allowance. The same goes with the legs. Trace them as is if you don't want Clydesdale legs, or cut along them at the gray line if you do. Then trace with that added seam allowance at the bottom. For the pieces you need 4 of, the hooves and ears, you'll need to trace each one twice to make 2 sets of mirror images. If you're making Clydesdale legs, you actually don't need to trace the hooves yet. Trace them onto whatever color fabric you want your hooves to be. For the ears, you need 2 right sides and 2 wrong sides. So trace the ear, then flip the pattern over to trace a second ear, so it's a reverse image of the first. Once you have all your cut lines drawn, you're ready to add the sew lines. To transfer the sew lines onto the fabric, you'll need to trim down your pattern pieces by cutting along the dotted sew line. Center the trimmed down pattern on the previously traced cut line and trace. Try to keep this line as clear and accurate as you can because you'll be sewing right along it. Cut out the piece along the cut line. The sew line should still be visible once the part has been cut out. The sew line needs to be traced on the mirror image as well, so turn over the fabric piece, then turn the paper piece face down and trace like you did on the other side. This will give you one right side and one wrong side, each with the sew line drawn on the wrong side of the fabric. Repeat the procedure on each of the other parts that you've traced so far. Trim the pattern piece along the cut line, trace it onto the fabric, cut out the fabric piece along the cut line, and trace the face down pattern piece onto the mirror image fabric piece. The hoof pieces should actually be cut out of whatever fabric you're using for the bottom of the legs. Don't cut them out now unless you're not making a Clydesdale. I am making a Clydesdale, so I'm just cutting these out as a demonstration. The ears are sewn flat, so you only need to trace the sew line on one side. Don't bother tracing onto the mirror image. The rest of the pieces are pretty straightforward. Just repeat the steps from before. You'll still need to cut out the nose, but you don't need a mirror image. So flatten out your fabric to a single layer, wrong side up, trace the cut line, trim the pattern, trace the sew line, and cut along the cut line. If you're making Clydesdale style legs, find the bottoms of the legs you cut off earlier. Cut one right side, one wrong side of each piece out of whatever material you want the hoops to be. Remember to add a seam allowance, this time at the top of each piece. Trim the patterns down the sew line and trace around them. Transfer the sew lines to the mirror images too. Cut the hook pieces out of the same fabric and trace the sew lines onto each one. The first things to sew are the darts. Darts look like this on the pattern. They need to go on the bottom of the nose, at the tail on the body, and on the face. Use a pin as a guide to make sure both sides of the dart are perfectly lined up. It should go in right on the line on one side and out right on the line on the other side. With the guide pin in place, it's lined up nicely, but it'll be tough to sew down that line with a pin in the way. So, add a pin perpendicular to the line, then take out the guide pin. Sew straight down the line and repeat on each of the other darts. Notice that only the bottom of the nose piece, the smaller end, is a dart. The top is the hairline, and it just needs to be snipped like this. Next, you'll attach the cheek pieces to the top of the nose. Pin them into place, again lining up the sew lines with the guide pins. And then replacing them with perpendicular sew pins. Then just sew down the line. Next, we'll sew the ears. They're the simplest part. Just sew down the line, leaving the bottom open so you'll be able to turn it right side out. But first, you have to clip around the curves and corners. This will keep the fabric from bunching up on the inside. You may also want to trim the edges a little before you flip. Add a little bit of shape by folding over the bottom of the ear. Use a zigzag stitch to lock it into place. Repeat on the other ear, but fold over the opposite side to make a mirror image. Moving back to the nose and cheeks, we'll be attaching those to the face pieces. They go together by lining up these points, joining them along the line up until this point. So use your guide pins to align the two sew lines as accurately as you can. When you've placed the guide pins all the way up to the point where the nose meets the cheek, replace the guide pins with sew pins. Now take the part you just pinned and carefully sew down the sew line. Repeat on the other side. Use guide pins to attach the cheek to the rest of the face on both sides. To position the ears, temporarily flip the head right side out. Place the ears how you want them and pin them into place. Replace the guide pins and sew up the rest of the head. Use a zigzag stitch to attach the ears, then switch back to a straight stitch to finish. Repeat on the other side, and you're ready to clip corners and curves, just like you did on the ears. Flip it right side out, and your pony has a head. Making a Clydesdale, you'll need some yarn the color of your pony's body. Take 3 fingers and wrap the yarn around them several times. Cut off the end and tie off the top of the loop. Then make another one, and another, and keep making them until your hand is about to fall off. Take the body piece and its cut off hooves. Place one of your yarn loops on the right side of the fabric at the base of the leg, and pin it in place between the top and bottom parts of the leg. Add 2 more loops as you pin along the line. Then replace all of the guide pins. Do the same on the hind leg, and get ready to sew down the line. Repeat on the other side of the body and on each of the leg pieces. From here on out, the instructions are the same, whether or not you're making a Clydesdale. Now you'll attach the leg pieces to the belly. Line them up like this and pin them together. Do the same with both legs and sew along the lines you just pinned. Repeat on both sides of the body. Clip the curves so they won't bunch up on the inside. Now we'll be attaching the belly and leg pieces to the body pieces. This pointy end is the tail, and this long end is the neck, so line up the body accordingly. Start just below the tail dart on the body piece. Attach it to the point at the end of the belly. Use guide pins to connect the back of the legs. And then the front of the front legs up to the neck. And then the middle. The middle can be tough to line up, so start at the hooves. Then center the top. And fill out the rest. Replace all the guide pins and sew. Sew the front and back first to help keep the center centered. Of course, you'll do the same thing on the other side too. Next, add the hooves. Pin the hoof piece into place with 4 guide pins, still lining up sew lines. Then sew them closed by hand. Start by pulling the thread through and knotting it. Then come in from the top, then come up again through the sew line on the other side. Take the loop of thread and bring the needle through it. Repeat this stitch all the way around each of the 4 hoops. Now it's time to put this pony's head on. Take the head and flip it inside out. You'll be attaching the body pieces to the bottom, one side at a time. The dart and the chin will mark the center between the 2 halves. As you pin, the seam line should start to line up. Replace the guide pins and sew. You should end up with something like this. So repeat on the other side of the head. With both sides of the body attached to the head, it's time to sew up the belly. Use guide pins to close from the chin dart all the way to the tail dart, then replace the guide pins and sew. Now you need a tail. Find something to wrap your yarn around. Here I'm using my 3DS, which seems to work pretty well. Tie off the end, trim the top and bottom, and make a bunch more while you're at it. You can use them for the mane, but for now we'll just need the one. Moving back to the body, sew down the back, leaving a small opening for the tail. Once the back is sewn, clip the curve, then stick your tail through the opening, with the base of the tail coming out the back. Run a zigzag stitch over the base of the tail to hold it in place, and you're finally ready to flip the plush right side out. And stuff it. You'll add the mane as you close the plush. Use the same stitch that you used on the hooves. Add the yarn plugs as you go, sewing them into place. With that little bit of leftover thread, just stick it into the plush close to where your stitches ended, and pull it out anywhere. Cut the thread right along the plush, and the end of the thread will disappear inside. If you've been making a Clydesdale, trim the yarn around the hooves. Cut a cutie mark out of felt. Use tacky glue to put the different pieces together. Cut 2 of each of the eye pieces out of felt in their appropriate colors, and use tacky glue to put them together. Once they're dry, you can glue the eyes and cutie mark to your pony. You can add a strip of black felt to accent the eye if you want.
And you're done! I hope you enjoyed learning to make ponies with me. Hit subscribe if you want to see me make more stuff. This has been Topsy from OhSewGeeky. Thanks for watching!